What is up, Partner Up? We're back. Isaac, how the heck you doing?
Jared, I just realized something. Our last episode, hold on. It might come out after this one. I'm trying to remember because we've got an off schedule this week. But you did not open with what is up, Partner Up.
The last one I just rolled into it. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to do it every time. I don't have to do it every time.
Okay.
I think
because I know cadence and ritual are very important for you. You know?
Yeah, so it's like a standard thing, but at the same time, I think rolling into a convo, was that the Braden one?
I think so.
Yeah, because we were just rolling into a convo too. So sometimes when we like all know each other, and like there's like a convo, I'm like, I was frazzled because I was trying to get my stuff set up. But ironically, I feel like whenever we have like a long-term relationship with like Jill or Braden or someone like that, we tend to roll in, and then if it's a normal episode, I'll start it that way.
So, all right. I thought I was going to get you. You're going to be busted for forgetting the on brand opening, but fair enough. It's flexible. I like it. Makes it real. Well, I'm excited about speaking of people that we know well. We're talking with Will Taylor today, and I'm really excited about this conversation because it's very, very much in my wheelhouse. This is the kind of stuff, I've been working with people on sort of careers and talking about a lot of the stuff we'll be talking about today for over a decade, my previous life before jumping into PartnerHacker. And, it's funny if you ask like, okay, what is a personal brand? I mean, it's basically just a reputation. Brand can make it sound kind of douchey or kind of cheesy, but it's basically a reputation. It's what comes to people's mind when they hear your name, or if they hear opportunities that might be in your wheelhouse. Do they think of you? Do you pop into their mind? That's kind of a way to think about it. And this is a great way to set this up, because when we first launched PartnerHacker just a couple of months ago, we're kicking it off. We're seeing that there's a bunch of people that are loving the PhD. Obviously, people have loved this podcast for a good while now. And we're really seeing a lot of momentum. And Jared messages me in Slack and he's like, hey, what if we made our first hire already? And I was like, I was thinking about that too. And he's like, I have somebody in mind. I'm like, so do I. And he's like, is it Will Taylor? And I'm like, yes. We both independently immediately were like, if we were going to make a hire, who would it be? And we both knew right away. And there's a reason for that. And neither of us have worked with Will in a professional capacity before. I didn't even know who he was until I started PartnerHacker with Jared a couple months ago. Why did that happen? And that's what I want to kind of unpack today. So, Will, first, can you give us just like a quick career timeline? Like, give us your sort of, where did you get started professionally and what led you to where you are now? And then we can kind of unpack some of the really interesting things that you've done.
No, Will, I need you to spend at least 10 to 15 minutes on your government experience.
Oh, no. PTSD
yeah,
for
okay.
me.
Well, there's enough content for that. Yeah. So I graduated from psychology and I was like, I want to be a therapist. And then I realized that's going to take a lot more schooling and there's not as much potential opportunity, at least for my ignorant, 20-year-old self, 22-year-old self thought. And I was in Kitchener, Ontario, where Vidyard is based, BlackBerry started. And so I kind of just fell into the tech scene just because my friends were there and, there was down the street an office of a tech company. And I was like, okay, I want to get into technology. I already had experience in sales, doing retail sales. And I was like, okay, I'll do sales. That's pretty general. That's a good way to break into an organization. And then my previous plan was actually, I'll get into HR because I had a minor in HR as well as my degree in psychology. And so I was like, yeah, I'll be a BDR and then the company will grow and they'll need HR people. So I'll be going into HR because, that's what I find interesting.
Will, I think you're the first person I've ever worked with that like set out to go be in HR. Like literally the Job Hive slogan that we had for a while, which no one liked and it was a horrible slogan. It was kind of like internal, was like ending HR or something. It was something horrible. Like it was like so anti-HR that like everyone's like, you can't say that publicly.
No,
right?
but this is so funny though. Cause so when I was in college, I like had no idea what I should major in. So I tried like everything because I'm like, I like people, I like ideas, I like communicating. What does that mean? So I was like communications, PR, HR. I looked at every one of those, and every one of them I like took a class and was like, eh. So like I totally get that. Well, maybe this is for me. I like people, humans. I don't know. But then Jared, just like you, I had two different companies in the sort of tech training space, and in both of them, we were like internally, like basically any company that has an HR department greater than one is already losing the battle. That's you've already got a messed up hiring problem. That's like the way that we thought about it, right? That's the way that we thought about it. So it is hilarious. So sorry, continue. So HR, you were almost sucked down the dark hole of HR.
Yep. And I liked the training aspect of it, which comes into play later. But I was selling software to the government, and this company took a leap of faith, so to speak. I had some sales experience, but they said, yeah, this Will guy, he seems eager and coachable. And so let's bring him on as our first BDR. Um, and I'm selling procurement software to the government. I didn't know what procurement was, I barely knew government. I wasn't too immersed in political sciences. And so I had to learn both of those things as well as doing tech sales.
Hey, Will,
And
were you extreme? This is a genuine question. Were you
uh-huh,
curious about the learning, or like during that process? Just to me, like you've said 3 trigger warnings now. So like knowing you now, like this is what's
uh-huh,
funny is like you've said government, you said HR, and you've said procurement, and all 3 of those things are triggering to me.
uh-huh.
Um, were you in that moment? I'm just curious. Were you curious about like sales and like tech and how things worked? And you're young enough to where you were like, oh no, this isn't, not what I want to do, or were you like, I cannot do this forever, like very quickly?
So at first, I was sold on the idea that it was very important. It wasn't necessarily something that I was like, oh, this is super interesting and, it's going to work my creative muscles. But I was like, okay, well, this has an impact on society because, politics are involved in procurement. They use taxpayer dollars. I'm a taxpayer. So I was like, oh, this sounds pretty important. I should learn about it in some form. And that was one of the pieces, I would say the least compelling. The most compelling was the career opportunity. And also, tech seemed cool. Vidyard had a cool office, and they had, a beer fridge on one of their floors, a foam pit, like all this cool stuff. My office didn't have that. I had a ping pong table, but that was, mostly the career trajectory where it was a lot of growth in a short amount of time. I was craving that because my previous role, I was just doing retail sales for a telecom. That was a little bit more limiting because it was with a larger corporation. So I was very hungry for the growth. That was the primary driver for my interest. And then let's say 35% of the interest was the actual space.
So Vidyard, that's you were BDR, you said?
No, so this company was called
Oh, I'm
Bonfire,
sorry. I'm sorry.
and it sold
That was when you left.
procurement
That was when
software
you
to the
left. Yeah,
government.
sorry. Yeah. So the
Yep, I did eventually join
yeah. So
Vidyard.
at Vidyard, was your first role there in partnerships?
Yes. So at Bonfire, I did BDR for a year. I, did pretty well. Then became an account executive. Was doing pretty well, and then COVID hit, and I was let go. And then I knew people who worked at Vidyard, and our office was basically across the road from Vidyard's office, so I knew a lot of people there, and then had some friends there. And there was this idea of partnerships, and it was partner enablement specifically.
Hmm.
The enablement piece I was wanting to get into for sales. I started to love sales, and I was like, great, I want to train other people to see this growth that I've seen as well. And so enablement, I'm like, I'm all in on that. I want to learn how to, train adults to develop their skills that make them better. And the partner aspect was interesting, but I didn't know a lot about it. And I tried to do it as a salesperson where, I was carrying a quota, and we went through a merger at Bonfire where we merged with 5 other companies. And in my mind, I was like, oh, there's a way for me to make sales easier. These other software companies that service government, they have these clients. Let me try and get an introduction. And it was very ad hoc. I tried to make the first co-sell happen. And at the time, I didn't know it was a co-sell. But that was my exposure to feeling the pains as a salesperson and wanting to make sales a bit easier for myself. And so I used that in the conversation in the interviews with Vidyard to attach that partnerships piece to the enablement piece. So very interested in enablement. I did it being the first person as a BDR at Bonfire. And then partnerships, I spoke through how, it makes sense. It makes sales easier. And I want to, learn more about that. And that's my nature as well, to be
You,
very collaborative. So that's when I took that first step.
you know what I'm hearing here, Jared? Something that you've pointed out and we've come across, especially a lot of people in sales who are kind of like starting to eyeball partnerships. You remember that meme with like the guy walking with the girl, but he's like looking at a different girl walking by the other direction, and the girl's looking
Yep.
at. It's like I feel like a lot of salespeople are kind of doing that. They're kind of looking over their shoulder at partnerships right now for the reasons that, because a lot of people are like Will, when you're describing your sort of trajectory, I can see already like you have the partnerships gene, right? There's something about you love. I mean, that's why you're interested in psychology or even HR, the enablement side of sales. You like to help people. So like when you figure something out for yourself, your immediate instinct is, oh, I want to show other people how I did it in case it helps them figure out the same thing, right? Like the guys who, fix their lawnmower and immediately go on YouTube and make a little video about how they did it through trial and error. And I'm so thankful for those, because then I'm like, how do I fix my lawnmower? I pull it up. Some guy is like, hey, I just did it. And what's interesting about that is the most helpful material tends not to come from experts, right? If you've ever pulled up videos to fix your lawnmower and there's some dude who's just like a lawnmower guru, it's not going to be that helpful. It's like too much. It's over your head. They're using phrases you don't even understand. When you pull up one that's like, hey, I could not figure out how to do this. I think I just figured it out. Let me show you. Someone who is just one step ahead of you. They're not an expert yet, but they're sharing their learnings out loud. That comes natural to you. And I think that's like a really core part of what makes a good partner person. I've just started to observe this. Again, I'm early in this partnership space, but this is kind of something that I've observed about the people who tend to do this well and who tend to be attracted to that. I don't know, Jared, would you say there's something there that I'm picking up on that you've noticed?
This is funny because this is a cool little moment too that they got the three of us on the partnership side, and then of course Ella. I don't think she's in producer mode today, but it's cool to have you on, Will. And we were just doing the SASE sales course, right? And the PartnerHacker SASE's joint, PartnerUp initiative. And in that conversation, so you were auditing it to like just feedback, like, hey, let's always get better, right? In that, I was doing some version of a clarion call to amp up the attendees, being like, hey, you matter. This role matters. Isaac, we independently were like saying the same thing. And I was referencing Will when I was talking about it. What's so funny is that same concept for partnerships is basically compound interest, right? So compound interest, I mean, the Naval Ravikant quote, like all gains in life, whether personal, business, or relationships, come from compound interest. So if you sit there and like you're like, hey, first job, like I sling LinkedIn lead generation by sending unpersonalized hundreds of LinkedIn emails a day. Every single interaction is an erosion of trust. But let's contrast that to Will. Will, what did you do differently? Right? Like you went from COVID to being, I don't know, like I see dozens of LinkedIn posts all the time that'll like, it'll reference like, 5 most helpful people in partnerships, or like 10 people you have to follow in partnerships, or thank you so much, Will. Like I see tons of independent validation about you all the time, all over social media. The guy Simon that sent me the cold LinkedIn message about how he's going to help a media company generate leads for his business through unpersonalized cold lead. I mean, come on, like really? Like I actually messaged him, Isaac, and I said, I never respond to these. I really hope you read what I'm about to say. And I wrote him like a little allegory of like why compound interest and how like he's going to regret this decision. And like, this is a dead industry, and nothing against you. I totally get it, but I really hope you read this article and you change your ways. Like, so Will, let's unpack that, because it's the same for individuals. Like, I feel like partner people like there's this interesting intersect where it's the same kind of concept, right? Like the whole point of partnerships ecosystems is that there's compound interest. It's not just a, hey, I got another lead. It's like, well, no, I worked with the company and then we can get more leads together later on too. How'd you do that between like, how'd you do that in 2 years,
Right,
dude?
right. I know
How did you do that in
that's
freaking
my
2 years?
mystery. I'm like, how young is this guy? He's had like
Right.
one partnerships job, and I go to Cloud Software, so SaaS Connect, and there's people lining up to shake this guy's hand and do office hours and stuff with it. And again, like there's a secret here that we got to tease out, and there's a reason me and Jared immediately wanted, thought of you to hire, that we got to tease out here. That I think, yes, part of it, you're a really talented guy. I'm not taking anything away from that, but there's something that you're doing that I think a lot more people can do. So help us out with that, Jared, Will, what is that?
It's because I'm a Canadian. No, it's I think
Hold
it's
on. Okay. Unpack that for a second. That was this is kind of funny. The SaaS Connect joke.
yeah. So there are a, yeah, a lot of partnerships people, at least seemingly, are Canadian, and I'm Canadian. PartnerSack, bunch of Canadians. Sunir's from Canada. Lindsay, who set up SaaS Connect, also Canadian. And my one of my best friends, also Canadian, is in partnerships. And so Isaac was like, maybe the reason that partnerships is blowing up is because Canada's taking control a little bit. They're being nice to people, giving and dominating business in some form. And
It's the
I
Canadian way. If you need
obviously,
cutthroat salespeople, come down south to the US. But if you need some partner people that like to collaborate, those Canadians just have it in them.
yeah. So I don't think it's just that. I think that probably helps, but yeah, honestly, it is the challenges that I felt as a salesperson where, I was doing the traditional methods and it was working some of the time, but there was this awkward feeling that I had where it didn't feel natural doing sales. And not natural as in I'm not a natural, but natural as in it doesn't feel like a normal conversation that I'm having with another person. And so my best sales were the ones where I had a really good relationship with the person, and I made introductions or I gave them something. And this is becoming more of a common theme within sales, but that thing where I had a better relationship and a better time speaking with this person when I was in that mode, although it's harder to track necessarily. It's technically dark social from a conversation and a referral happens. That was the pain that I felt. And so I started thinking, well, I have this personal mission where I want to give as much as possible. How can I do that at scale? And that's where partnerships come in. But how can I also have a business benefit through that? And what I learned, and after Vidyard, when I joined Mailshake as the only partnerships person, I learned that if I give first, then I receive a lot in return. And it's not with the intent of giving to receive, but just the fact that it does happen where, I could approach a potential partner with this message of value that was so good that, and it was all in the idea of them getting value, that it was hard for them to say no. And that was really powerful. That kind of flipped a light switch in me where I'm like, okay, well, if I do this with other people, and I was already kind of doing this, but if I formally did this with other professionals, then there's going to be this massive effect. Um, and so I, on a personal note, also have always felt like I didn't really have a large network. And so when I felt that pain of like, where am I going to go next? When I was let go
Wait, hold on
at
a
the start of
second.
COVID,
Hold on a
I,
second.
yeah,
When did you feel you didn't have a large network? How long ago are we talking? Because that's crazy to me to hear you say that.
yeah, honestly, I would say probably like 2020 is
Kids
when
these
I
days, Isaac.
felt it
Kids
last.
these days. We immediately feel old.
So yeah, so 2 years ago you felt like you didn't have much of a network, and now to me at least it seems like you have a really massive network. So when you had that realization, what steps did you take? What did you say? Okay, how am I going to remedy this?
Yeah, so it was keep doing what I'm doing by being, a giver first, but also how can I do this at scale? And so I started off by booking meetings with people. I like immersed myself in a community. I spent time talking to people. But then I started to think like, okay, well, this is great. I only have so much time. How can I have more of this? How can I give more at scale? And that's where content creation started to come in, where I started seeing people, the Justin Welsh of the world, Morgan Ingram, and they're just blowing up by creating videos and giving to people. And they're getting business opportunities from that, and of course they're growing their network massively in terms of followers and probably having lots of conversations. That was an initial inspiration where I thought, okay, well, if I create content, then that is networking at scale and that's giving at scale, because in every single sense of the manner of creating content, there's going to be someone who's going to reach out and say, "Hey, I liked this. Let's chat." And the more that I can create those opportunities, the less time I'm spending, doing the outbound side of things. But B, I can give more at scale as well. My positive impact can be accentuated more than just an individual conversation. Why not, summarize one of those conversations, put it into a post, and then it helps 10 other people. For me, that was enough. And I mean, I don't go viral or anything now. My posts do pretty well, but my main intent is, if I was starting or I learned this today or a day earlier, I would have been so much better off. So I want to give that to people. And I think, going back to your example of the lawnmower, where it's not experts who create the content and that's the best content, that's what I want to do. It's simplified, it's relevant to a lot of people, and it can impact at a very large scale. And that's exactly what is aligned with my personal goals, where if I can crack that code of influence at scale and impact at scale, then I should really lean into it. And creating content does that. And it is in some form eventually self-serving, but the initial intent is, let's give first and have that widespread impact.
Well, this idea, like a lot of people might hear that and say, okay, but I don't have a personal brand and I'm not really that type of a person. Well, you do. You have a brand whether you like it or not. Okay. So what's beautiful about the age we live in, really for the first time in human history, you have granular control over that brand. You have the ability to take ownership of it. Your brand is not the family you happen to be born into, your family name, or the city you're from, or the place you went to school. That's what your brand used to be, right? Because people didn't have time to figure out anything else. That just kind of was stuck with you, and you had to, if you wanted to be thought of as something different, you had to do a ton of work over a long time. Now, your digital reputation, your body of work, your digital footprint is under your control. And so like you have a brand, right? I mean, even if I Google you and nothing comes up, or I go on LinkedIn and nothing comes up, that is a type of a brand. It's a brand. In my mind, I'm going to associate you with nothing, which means if an opportunity comes my way that might be interesting to you, I won't know that because I don't know that you're interested in that kind of opportunity, right? Your luck surface is tiny. You can increase your luck surface area by taking charge of that brand, and just, you don't have to like go out and be like, hey, let me tell, I'm a thought leader, right? You can just do that learning out loud. And LinkedIn is so interesting with this. They've managed to, and it can be cheesy and formulaic and people are trying to game it and stuff like any social platform, but they've managed to maintain a level of sort of optimism and positivity that I don't see on other platforms. And so you'll see some of the most interesting and high engagement posts are things like, hey, I was struggling every time I tried to have a call like this at work, and I kept running into a problem and I couldn't really figure it out. So I started experimenting with this, and I just did it yesterday and it seemed to work well. Right. And it's this very like transparent, here's where I am in my career. I'm not pretending to be an expert. I'm telling you, hey, I just solved this. Maybe if you're having the same problem, that will be interesting. So I've noticed that you do that kind of stuff. You're very honest about your learnings, but you don't just like post. You comment and you engage with people. You're very generous. You're very kind. If anyone tags you, you'll jump on there. You're having a conversation. You're participating in it. It's not just a one-way. It's not like a billboard. Here's the latest from Will. It's like, hey, I'm in your world. I'm in your ecosystem, right? I'm investing in this whole thing. I'm one of us, right? There's just something there that like, it's not a really high bar. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable posting, So people listening out there, at least just engage, comment, send people a DM and just tell them, hey, I loved that post you had the other day. I thought that was great. Like, it's just real stuff. It's stuff that you would do if we were face to face. And I think just bringing that digitally, it's incredible. I mean, in just 2 years, you've built this really profound network. So absolute testament to the power.
I have to comment on this real quick because what's so funny about this is obviously I'm a big Jill Rowley, fanboy. Jill's just she's always helpful. She's always great. Did you know
We're
who?
gonna
So
we're gonna
she's
start
a
we're gonna start like a drinking
90.
game, by the way, Jared. Like there's certain things like certain phrases and ideas, whatever, certain things that you say where we should just do a shot. I don't know. We would be passed out maybe, but Jill Rowley is one of them. Jill, you come up all the time. Jared is definitely a fanboy.
She coined helping is the new selling in 2015. 2015. And that's kind of what we're saying, right? And I'm looking at Sales for Life, which I'm pretty sure she was co-founder of, or I don't know, something. And it's how creating value uncovers opportunities. It's exactly what you just said, Will. And the reason why I brought that up is, this person that's credited with inventing social selling is like, look, that's actually the PartnerUp origin story too. The PartnerUp origin story is after I landed the big deal with Panadoc and HubSpot, Rembrandt asked me, Altos asked me, some venture firms, hey, can you like help our head of sales at another portco do this? And then I did. And then like slowly over a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, literally there was a point at Drift where I was doing 1 to 3 for free. Just like I was helping a fellow partnerships person or company or investor. It just like kind of got out there, like, just reach out to Jared. He'll be helpful. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I honestly cannot do 1 to 3 calls a day. My wife finally was like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm helping someone. She's like, get off the phone. Get off the phone. And I'm like, I gotta. And I was like, I guess I'll start a podcast. And it was like, and I'll just, the people that I would go ask. So Will, the other thing I wanted to kind of pivot this right off the back of is it's not that you need to know all the answers, right? To Isaac, to your point, it's not about, the luck surface area, these things. 9 times out of 10, I don't. I repeat myself a lot because the things that I know to be true, high conviction, that's what matters. The things that I don't, I'm like, oh, I have no idea. I hadn't thought of it that way. But 3 people come to mind. That is also a superpower, right? The network. So that you start producing content and you're learning out loud, etc. You increase that luck surface area. It doesn't mean you have to have the answers to every test, but you can get really good at getting to the people that do. That's this other tangential benefit that like partnerships, helping is the new selling, partnerships. I mean, in a QBR. So Will, you've ran, quarterly business reviews with a partner account.
Mm-hmm.
Typically it's just so formulaic and blah, 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 blah. One of the things that I loved was showing up to the QBR with like your most strategic partners with something that was a problem of theirs that they didn't even ask you about, already solved. And 9 times out of 10, you had to go to someone else to do that, right? You had to go out of your way, out of the normal, to be helpful. So like following up, and like someone asks you for advice, then what do? You go and talk to other people first, and then you make an intro. You just actually did twice as much work. Super interesting. And then it compounds. And then you just made another connection where there might be a valuable relationship there. Compound interest, man. I'm telling you. You recognize that really quick in terms of a career pivot, man. And I think there's lots of people that are waking up to it.
Yeah,
What's your
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
what's your take on this kind of like rising tide stuff? Like my evangelism and hype machine. I'm just like the hype guy right now. Um you audited the SASE course. I'm curious what your I don't know, your forecast, so to speak, on like sales at large or some of the other things that you've seen in that transition. Is everyone a Will? Can everyone like move that direction? Or what would you be, for someone that's like, hey, I've been like a long time listener, first time caller, right? They've been listening to PartnerUp. They've never posted anything. Like, how do they get over that cold start problem?
Cold start problem for posting content?
Well, it's like the eco. If I was going to title this episode, it's like the ecosystem of one, right? It's like,
Hmm.
who are the companies, the partners, the accounts that like, you really know lots of people, you have lots of nodes and trust, and you've done business with them, right? So like my surface area for companies that I've done actual real business, good deals with, like uh from outreach to marketing automation, like public companies where I can call an executive and they'll take my call. I can DM them, I can text them, and they'll be like, yeah, like trust them. But you don't start there, right? That happens over time. Um, and then the content adds on top of it. So the cold start problem, the ecosystem of one is like the other side too. It's the individuals or the community, right? So like Will Taylor, you have people that will say good things about you because you've helped them for what? You take their money, you take their time? Not really. You just help them. So if you have nothing, where do you start?
Yeah, that's where, like, I would argue that you always have something, even if you're, an outsider
Ooh.
looking in. You have an opinion. If you're in marketing and you're seeing all this partnership stuff, and you want to maybe dive into partnerships, you still have a perspective. Your perspective is different and it's valuable. And if you're, day one, you have a perspective that's different from someone who's, year 10. And so I'm of the believer of the mindset that it doesn't matter, where you are in your journey. You have value to provide. And the reason for that is because if I'm on day one of, let's say, being a partner professional, there's someone who's on day zero and they want to know what day one is like. And so if I'm on year one, I should talk about, what was year one like. There is someone on day zero, day 15, who needs some answers, needs some form of guidance, and they want the most up-to-date version of that, not necessarily, the traditional channel world of 20 years ago. They want someone who is immersed in it in the last year, or, yesterday, kind of thing. And so I would argue that anyone who's listening who's like, oh, I don't think I have valuable things to say, you do, because your perspective is similar to at least one other person out there. And that community is only going to continue to grow, especially as you become that evangelist yourself. And so for me, like, if I'm talking about the bridge between sales and partnerships, I'm not the only one who's a salesperson who have felt the pains of doing sales and want to get into partnerships or make it easier through partnerships. There's many people who are going through that. And so if I think, oh, I'm the only guy posting about this, sure, but that doesn't mean that there's not, 1,000 people who are feeling the same thing and that I have a message that resonates with them. So, uh, yeah, I would say you always have value to provide.
Curiosity is so undervalued. Curiosity can kill the cold start problem, can
Oh,
overcome
yeah.
that, because there's no level of expertise you need to be curious, right? Anyone at any stage can be. When I did nonprofit fundraising, I was meeting with all these really wealthy people, and ultimately asking them to fund the things we were doing. But I was like, just selfishly, this wasn't a tactic. I was like, I'm meeting with somebody who's made tons of money, who's self-made millionaire, sometimes billionaire from these businesses they start. I'm so curious, like, how they did it. And I was genuinely, so I would just ask them all about their business all the time. And they loved it. They loved it, right? Because what do they usually get? Let me tell you about our program. Let me tell you how good you're going to feel donating to it. I would be like, okay, I got to make sure that I have time to like say something and make an ask of money from them, because I know that's what I'm here for. But I got to take this 30 minutes, this lunch that I have with this person who made a multi-million-dollar plastics company. I don't know anything about this. It's so fascinating to me. How did they get into it? How did that work? And that curiosity is such a superpower if you cultivate that. And there's this really interesting thing that can happen sometimes. Like, the things that work in your work, the things you do for your job, sometimes it's easy to forget that those also apply outside your job. So in partnerships in particular, what are you doing in the world of partnerships, right? You're investing in your ecosystem. You're living in your community. You're creating value for partners, all these things we talk about. But often within your formal role, people can sort of feel like, especially early on, all that is living in your company Slack channel and your emails and your HubSpot and your Salesforce and whatever, PRM. That's all living in your official work duties. But when you go on to social media, for example, or into your normal life, you're not bringing those principles with you. And here's the crazy paradox. if you apply those things to your non-work life, that's actually a way to leapfrog ahead in your work life, right? So the person who is in their official capacity, they're being helpful to partners, people they do business with, they're asking them questions, whatever. Yeah, that's good. That's table stakes. They're doing the job. But people who take that same mentality with them to LinkedIn, where yes, they're a representative of the company, but not entirely. That's kind of LinkedIn's whole thing. You're kind of yourself, even though you're also they take that and they're just being helpful to other people who are maybe even competitors in their own, role at a different company, and they're bringing that same mentality. Those people will often leapfrog ahead in their career. They'll go from just being an individual contributor to being a leader in the space way faster than if they just do their job internally and wait for someone to promote them, because they're like going outside the walls of the company to put the ecosystem thinking in practice in their own life and career. Just like they do with customers, they're doing it with friends and people in their network and competitors and everything else. And that somehow it has this positive feedback loop. It's like if you live that way, with people who will never even be customers, they're just random people you meet. If you send them thank you notes the way that you would a customer, somehow this, like, it creates this crazy thing that ends up accelerating you in your career, even though the things you're doing don't directly relate to it. I know I'm kind of rambling about several topics here, but like in my mind, they all tie
Yeah.
together. It's all
No,
one.
they do. They
Yeah.
do. This is I have a secret agenda, which been going very well the past 4 podcasts, is to really increase Isaac's talk time, because the amount of content this human has consumed and produced and aggregated is mind boggling. And I don't know. There's something interesting about the uh, information, like not asymmetry, but like dissymmetry, whatever that word is, between people that are curious and people that are really, set in their ways, so to speak. Curious people are interested in the other party, their story, their learnings. Like, what does this person know that might help me, and what does this person care about so I can help them? That If that's like kind of core to who you are, you just see those people go so much further in life. I mean, the smartest CEOs I know, they read more than everyone else, and they never try to solve a problem by themselves. They always call someone smarter than them every time, every single time. It's your ecosystem, man, right? So now you got the great people to call on. So like, I mean, hey, Isaac and I aggressively recruited you, because it was like, hey, we're launching this thing, like, it's official. We got a little bit of money. Let's make our first hire. It was like, come in like next week, like right now, like come in right this second. But let's say something blew up and like the business imploded or whatever. Getting your next thing, starting an independent consulting company, doing whatever.
Yeah, because it's easy, because it's like, here's this guy, he's creating value. Whether anyone pays him to do it or not, he's creating value. Well, if I see someone creating value, I'm going to be like, I want them to create value for me. So that's why you do it out loud, right? That's why you don't just keep it behind the closed doors of the company, because you're going to attract that. So okay, so Will, we got a few more minutes here. I want to get tactical. I want to get really tactical. How do you approach this? Because you're still doing this. It's not like something you did and all of a sudden it was successful. You're engaging with your network all the time, doing things like, hey, I'm just going to do office hours just for the heck of it. Tactically, how do you approach this? Do you have like daily rituals? Are you like, okay, every morning I'm going to start by spending 20 minutes on LinkedIn. I'm going to comment so many times. I'm going to do so many posts a week. I'm going to do like, how are you being deliberate? Do you have specific rituals or habits that you have for yourself in order to continue to invest in your network?
Yeah, absolutely. I carve out time every day to post. So right now, I'm not planning the posts in advance. I want to. I want to use a scheduler tool, but that is hopefully something that gets done in the next few months. But I show up, I post, over 10 to 15 minutes. It's second nature to create the content now in a digestible format. And then, off the tail end of that, there are like these micro groups that I am trying to inspire to create more content, or help them out with content. And that's across a few different groups where I have a bit of a deeper relationship with these people, and I'm helping them out on a more consistent basis. And I engage with those people, and I also sign up for notifications for the people that I like, that are trying to post more. And that are relevant to my space as well. So that helps me to, they post at a certain time. I dedicate, whatever it is, 15, 20 minutes or so, check out those notifications, check out their posts, and then engage with it. And it's not a lot of time. And although I've built the habit, it's not a lot of time. And the way that I talk about it for anyone who's thinking about starting is approach it in 3 different phases. Phase one is just build the habit of posting, 5 days a week or every day. Do that for 30 days and you'll have the habit. Second phase, for the next 30 days, refine the content, make it a bit more easy to digest, and put a framework to it so that it's not just your stream of consciousness. It's structured thoughts that are easy to consume. So top 3 list, or here's some bullet points, or whatever form that is. And then the third phase is the phase that I'm in, is try and systematize. So save yourself some more time where you can focus on engaging more, but systematize, schedule out posts and create templates. And this is honestly from not the 3-phase approach, but the general idea of systematizing it is from Justin Welsh, who talks about, he's making money talking about how to post content on LinkedIn by posting content on LinkedIn. And he does all of this where, he has categories of these different templates: make me feel, make me think, challenge me, so on and so forth. Create those templates, inject your context, and it gives this variety, but also this structure. And it's also not in a robotic way. It's in a way that is just easier to consume, and you don't have to think about the structure. You just think about those very valuable thoughts. So, first things first, carve out time, 15 minutes a day, even if you're posting just like, word soup that are your thoughts, build the habit, and then go from there and start refining it as you go.
You said something really interesting, that it feels like, oh, well, that's going to get all like stuffy and pre-programmed if you create this, system. Or even I've had people even say, if I like, hey, blog every day for 30 days. I'm a massive advocate of that, have been for years, and gotten many people on the train. But, oh, well, then, I'm forced to publish a blog post every day. Well, I don't know that's just all like, it's all formulaic and it's all forced. What if maybe I want to do a painting instead, or maybe, and there's this TED talk from way back in the day. It's like maybe my all-time favorite. It's called Embrace the Shake. And it's about this artist who he ended up getting some kind of injury or disability where his hand just shook like crazy. So he could no longer do the kind of art he wanted. So he was like utterly depressed for a long time. Finally, he was just like, he snapped out of it and he was like, okay, I'm going to come up with a challenge for myself. Since I can no longer do this type of painting, I am going to make a piece of art using only Starbucks coffee cups, or only peanut butter and jelly, like crazy things. He would come with these really, really constrained, like I can only use dots with a Sharpie on a white piece of paper. What can I create? And he was like, I was in this total creative funk, but once I put ridiculously tight constraints on myself, I suddenly had this explosion, because sometimes the optionality is too much. It's overwhelming for our brains. Oh, go post something on LinkedIn. Well, what do I post? How do I do it? I could be anything. It's too much. It's overwhelming. If you're like, okay, post a haiku every day for a week. Seriously, I've done this kind of thing. Like, even if it's goofy, force yourself to do a haiku. All of a sudden, within the bounds of that structure, you'll find this creative explosion. You're like, well, how many different ways are there to it could be that haiku about the same thing every day. Try it for 10 days. You don't have to share it publicly. Try to make a haiku every day about football for 10 days in a row. And suddenly you'll find your creativity is easier because you're within this bounded constraint. So if you're like, you set up that system, and I've seen you do it, there's so much room for improvisation. It's like jazz music, right? There's basic structures that you're stuck within, but then you get all this room to improvise and to throw in things that you weren't planning on, and suddenly say, you know how I'm going to use my post today? I'm just going to do a picture, or I'm just going to post, I'm just going to invite anybody to DM me and send me the coolest article they read this week, right? All of a sudden you'll get this flowering of ideas if you develop the habit and you systematize the habit. And now you have the peace of mind that it's just going to happen on its own. I mean, this is like the PhD we send out every day, right? It's got a structure. It's going to go out every single week. We're constrained to that. And somehow that gives you this surface to experiment within constraints that aren't overwhelming.
Absolutely. And it's, I think it benefits creativity. So anyone who thinks it's more robotic, it's like, if you can't think of anything, you get writer's block, whatever it is. If you look at, let's say, a template, and the template is top 3 things I wish I knew in blank, I can think of 3 things easily on, what I wish I knew. So there's an idea right there from a template. And so I absolutely agree that it sparks creativity more than hinders it, and it guides it essentially. Because you're right, there are so many things you could say.
Will, dude, I feel like you got me so excited in this episode. I just preached at you instead of I did not practice what I preach of being curious and asking people questions. I just started rambling. I get so hyped up.
No, so there's learning out loud, there's being curious, and then there's just like geeking out. Because we like know each other and we work with each other. Like honestly, you throw us into a restaurant or something, like after work hours. This is literally the conversation that you walk into. Like it's not an exaggeration. Like we're not like I think Isaac does a good job of maybe trying to do like a basketball game and like, okay, he really likes the Warriors, but like, man, like it takes like a year for me to like potentially introduce some new thing. Like maybe I'm interested in a sports team for like a little bit, and then like the next year it's gone. But otherwise, like we're pretty much talking like this all the time. So yeah, we're geeking out. We're gonna have you back on though because you're part of the squad now,
Hell yeah.
man.
This was fun. I liked seeing
Awesome.
you both
Yeah.
get passionate and have that stream of consciousness go. That's also what I intend to do in my conversations. So um, this was great. I liked it.
We got a couple things to plug and talk about Sunday story quickly, Isaac.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say we have like some sort of like Will's Corner, some kind of like recurring,
Oh yeah, we should give him a series.
Would that be
I'm
fun?
game.
Sunday
Yeah.
Story. If you guys haven't seen, we've done 2 of them now, and I absolutely love putting these together. I love just being able to dive into a particular category, a particular company. Um, the stories of the people in the partnership space and the companies in the partnership space are absolutely fascinating. So if you guys haven't seen them, I hope you read them. The most recent we did on deck business development program, the ODBD. So on deck was founded like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's like a sort of started as like a fellowship for aspiring founders who are like, hey, I want to found companies and, kind of just getting together. And then it kind of became very organically as this community. It became, they started doing grants and they started investing in some of these companies and they kind of turned it into a bit more of a program. And the growth was so insane. And I think the near and dear to my heart, the education space in sort of traditional education is so lacking in terms of if you want to get into startups or become a business development rep or a partner manager, right? Or any of these roles, most people don't even know they exist, let alone know how to succeed in them. And so they just exploded like a year ago with all these different offerings of basically the key roles at startups. Like, okay, maybe you don't want to be a founder, but if you're going to be that startup's first marketing leader or first partnerships leader or first sales leader, they kind of put these fellowship programs together. And the business development fellowship is specifically for people going into those biz dev roles at tech startups. And we just kind of dive into, the evolving space and the way that talent, the way that learning has changed and the way that kind of the combination of community and content, you sort of come together to provide the best surface for advancement and for learning in those careers. And so definitely check out the story and check out On Deck's
So
business development fellowship. Like if you're like early in the space or you're looking to break into this space or you just want to expand your network and you want to get connect with what are all the other companies out there? What are all the other, people who are working in this, the biz dev and partnership side of startups? Absolutely check it out. I've been a fan of Eric Torenberg, who started On Deck for a lot of years. It's got a really interesting podcast. Very curious guy. His podcast is just all about interesting questions. So I've been very impressed with watching what they've done, and since they launched this program that's so relevant to our audience, it was really awesome to be able to dive into that story.
So here's what I got out of the story that you it's kind of cool because I get to see Isaac kind of like pull out like the real why, and then I get to like process it before it's like out in market. And the real takeaway from me was like this atomization of like signal. Like signal is like closer to you now. And I always love the Rohn quote, like you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Now, people think about that in like I think a business, like a very strict business sense, like, oh, I'm a founder, so therefore I need to be spending time with like better people. But like imagine, okay, you're just coming into like your first executive role. Like, okay, you got promoted to director or VP. And you're at a company where like literally no one's done that before. So there's communities that are out there that are great for like asking big questions, but cohort based team things, I am a full believer in having a cohort, and that's why I liked. I mean, On Deck's. I actually have 4 friends now that have gone through On Deck, started companies, and been venture funded. So I'm like, okay, there's something special with that model. They're really doing well in a space that was very heated. But for partnerships, I'm like that really is a secret. Like if I could have gone back in time and had 5 others, 5 to 10, 15 other people, like a small group cohort where I'm going through that first year together with them, dude, that's sick. Like I really, really like that because like partnerships leaders has its spot, but it's just not the same to have like this fully planned first month.
There's a
Or like
level of commitment and
crazy.
structure, that, imagine everything we just talked about with Will, the kind of things, doing in those first couple years, doing that together with a group of people who are all doing it at once in kind of a higher level of intensity and focus. There's just some
With the
magic
same
that comes
cadence.
out of that you can't predict,
Right. So like you might come into, any community. There's, several different communities out there now, but the experience it will, it's what you
Mhm.
talked about, like the, year 0, year 1, year 5, year 10, like the year 10 ecosystem executive that's like trying to orchestrate across a 5,000 person company. Like I appreciate all you out there that like listening to the first principles. I think that's the thing Isaac, you and me, and we're trying to do is like make first principles apply to everyone. But the reality is you bring someone on like there's certainly particular topics or executives where it's like that's not going to help the frontline partner manager that much. Like it's like not right now. Like cool to file that away, but like that's not what I need. So like the relevancy, the signal is very high. It's atomized, right? It's the people around you. Feedback loops are better. Like it's you have college class sizes of 400 people versus like 20. They tend to have some very interesting outcomes where the smaller group sizes work phenomenal.
Yeah,
What else?
big shout out to On Deck Biz Dev program, and then Ecosystem Week 2022 coming up real soon. So if you haven't signed up yet, we're doing this with PartnerStack. Go sign up. There's a big ad, our singular ad on PartnerHacker.com. We just have one, and right now it's up in the corner there. Ecosystem Week. You can go register. It's free. It's going to be killer, absolutely killer lineup.
One last thing too, because this will hopefully it's be done by the time it's there. Isaac, did the styling didn't change on the site yet, right? Or did it? And am I going crazy? I debated this back and forth with Alex for like 5 minutes.
No, I don't think the styling changed yet. It was a somewhat subtle change that you recommended, but it wasn't that subtle. I don't think it's changed
Okay.
yet.
I was losing my mind. So we got a couple little neat things coming out too that we're excited to announce and talk about after Ecosystem Week. It's gonna be a blast. How many we got? We got what? Well over 500 people.
We have, I think we have over 600 people already registered.
All
And at the
right.
time
All
of
right.
recording this, it's only been like a week and a half since we announced it.
So yeah, I mean, if you're probably already attending if you're listening to this show. I wish I could do podcast segmentation, marketing automation. If not, go share it. So if you're not like, you're probably attending because let's be honest, this is the first time ever this conference has existed, and guess what? It's going to be the biggest partnerships ecosystems conference ever. So I'm excited. Well, I should say B2B SaaS. Obviously, there's some IT partner stuff that's pretty big, but B2B SaaS, it's going to be the biggest one ever, and I'm really excited about it.
Love it.
All right.
Will, this was awesome. Thanks,
Thank
man.
you guys.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. We're going to do a corner with Will.
Nice.
Something like that. I like that idea. Let's pull that thread, give him like a little syndicated spot.
Let's do it.
On the squad. All right, partner up. We will see you all next week. Peace.